Okay, good evening, everybody. Can everyone hear me? I'm not used to having these lapel mics. I'm a little bit of a loudmouth, so I know that that's difficult for everybody here to believe, but I'm short and loud, so you're welcome for that in advance. I'll try to keep my voice to a minimum so I don't kind of blow you guys out. My name is Lacey Holland, and I am a school resource officer with Mountain Home Police Department. I'm the sergeant of the School Resource Officer Division. I'm one of 6 officers who patrol the school on an everyday basis. And within our division of Mountain Home PD, we're kind of the training division. So this is why I'm down here today talking to you all, is because we not only train our police officers to go through different steps that they need to have in order to successfully complete their jobs, but we also come out and educate the community too. So tonight we're going to be talking about civilian response to active shooter events. And this is really how we can empower our community to take charge of any type of critical events that you might find yourselves to be a part of in reference to things like active shooter, active killer events. So I know this is kind of a touchy subject considering some of the events that have happened as of late, but this really does empower our community. This empowers you all to be able to take steps to take care of yourselves and others around you until law enforcement can arrive. So this is right at about a 2-hour presentation. I'll take about a 10-minute break for you all. I'll let you get up and stretch and kind of go use the restroom if you need to. And then we'll kind of kick off into the second half of things, which should take about 45 minutes. So I think you guys are really going to like this presentation overall, because again, this is all about what you all can do to help us and what we can do to help you guys. So this is very much a cooperation effort between law enforcement and our community. So a little bit of background behind, you can see on the screen behind is CRAES, is Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events. So how CRAES became along is ALERT is the national standard that law enforcement operates under. So ALERT stands for Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training. So this is the national standard that police officers are taught under in how to respond to critical events. So ALERT was created, it's a company that was created out of Houston, Texas years ago in the early part of 2000s by a group of police officers who thought we have got to come together and figure out a better way for law enforcement to respond to critical events. So kind of what spurned this was Columbine. Is everybody familiar with Columbine? Anybody remember that? That was a big game changer for law enforcement. So these guys out of Houston came along and said, listen, we've got to make some major changes because a lot of people passed away unnecessarily. Okay, so they came up with different strategies and data that was collected over the years, and they came up with strategies that were useful and helpful for police officers and gave us the tools that we needed to be able to walk into a scene and take care of business. So in this, through the data and through the different types of collection that we have as law enforcement, because we're data driven, okay, we don't just create things and think, I think this will work, we're going to go ahead and use this. Through the data that was collected, we were able to create a program and create classes that law enforcement could be a part of to better help our communities when they needed us the most in these critical events. But the missing piece to that was CRAES. Okay, so we thought, okay, we're kicking butt, we're taking names, we're working these issues out, we're saving our communities, but on the other half of things, our community members are like, hey, we don't know what to do before you guys show up. We don't have any idea on how to save ourselves. So they came up with CRAES, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So again, this is about a 2-hour program. We'll take about an hour to talk to you all, and then we'll take a break, and then I'll switch over to my partner. All right, we'll jump right on into this. I'm going to try to make sure this... Am I doing this right, guys? Is there a magic location? Stand by, everybody, stand by. Okay, so I took a few minutes, myself and Officer Nick Mays, who's one of my partners at Nelson Wilkes Elementary. So he is our fellow right down the road here at the end of College Street. I work over at the junior high, so I work with 14 and 15-year-olds. And he works with our 1st and 2nd grade group. So he's just down the hall, and we go all over and teach this to everybody that will possibly listen to, because this is by far the best training that we can provide us to those of you all in the community. But what I walked around and noticed, I don't know if some of you guys saw me kind of walking around, was I was kind of trying to take in what type of area we've got going on here at College and North Street Church of Christ. So can anybody tell me without looking around how many exterior exits are in this room alone? Has anybody stopped to think about that? I'm seeing 5, I'm seeing 2. I'm seeing 4. Anybody else? So heading to the exit of this within this room. How many do we have without looking around? 7, 6. You actually have 9. Did you know that you have 9 exit points within this room?
2 doors lead outside.
Correct.
The other doors lead to inside.
That does have the potential to lead exterior. So I can see 4 exterior points of exit within just kind of looking left, right, and then to the rear. So there's 4 exit points from that area, but you've got 9 total within just this room to be able to exit this room completely. Okay, that's pretty impressive around here. Something else that I kind of noticed as we walked in was not only do you have a medical bag back here for any type of medical emergencies, but you also have a defibrillator. You've got an AED too. That's impressive. Okay, so round of applause for you guys for being safety conscious here at College and North Street Church of Christ. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Something else that I noticed around here is you guys have lots of different secondary exits too. What do you think you would consider a secondary exit in this room? Windows, right? Okay, does anybody know that those are like hard plastic panes? They're not necessarily glass. It really wouldn't take a whole lot to push something through that with just a little bit of force behind it. So that's pretty impressive too. I don't know if that is if that was intentionally designed that way, but good for you guys because that's another safety feature that you have here within this room. Okay, that's pretty impressive. So you all got a lot of stuff going on around here. I also like that you have security cameras that are strategically featured within this room too, because a lot of people don't believe this, but security cameras in itself are a natural deterrent. Okay, just like law enforcement's cars outside of schools, this is a natural deterrent. Okay, because whenever it comes to any kind of active killer profile, they want to remain as low profile as they possibly can until the very minute that they execute these types of incidents. Okay, so if they know they're coming into a place that's already pretty squared away, I can promise you that they really just don't have any idea about what they're fixing to get into. Okay, so the fact that you guys have some good stuff going on around here, you guys should give yourselves a pat on the back. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Just to kind of show you in conjunction what you all are dealing with here, you have just as many exterior exits here within just this one building as the entire building of Orscheln's. Orscheln's only has 4 exterior points. Did you know that? Mr. Cameron, can you tell me how many exits are in Walmart? Any idea? Not anymore, couldn't tell me? Okay. So just to kind of put things into perspective for you, Walmart's got 17 exits. Lowe's, Home Depot, 14 and 15 exits. Okay, but Orscheln's has 4, so they have as many as you all have here within this building. So we're going to talk about why that's important to remember those types of things here in just a little bit. So let's talk about some things that you guys already have in place. You already have some medical emergency equipment available to you. Is anybody in here CPR or AED trained? Wow, good for you all. Okay, that's excellent. What about a tornado? Is anybody in here familiar with any type of tornado evacuation or tornado protocol that you have here within your building? Basement, okay. Would everybody agree that that's what you guys would do? Okay, that's awesome. Earthquake, bomb threat, active shooter. Anybody have any type of idea of what your plans are here at the Church of Christ should something like that happen? And if you do, just blurt it out. Say that one more time. The exits? Okay.
Had one fire, the vent fan in this lady's back in the crossfire probably 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
And everybody quietly exited out down to this north end.
Okay.
Worked out pretty good, pretty quick.
Okay, that's excellent. As the congregation here, do you guys participate in any of those types of drills? None that you're aware of? Okay, all right. So I hope by the end of this presentation, this may help kind of turn the wheels a little bit for you all, so maybe we can help better plan for those types of events heaven forbid they never, that they never occur, but preparing yourselves to deal with those types of events is exactly why we present this stuff, okay? We kind of want to get the wheels turning for you. So you guys have quite a bit in place already. That's very impressive. We'll work on the back end of that. Do you all have a crisis team in place? Any type of crisis team? Do we have anybody here who is considered security for the... You do, okay. So without giving too much information away, do you have somebody who is like maybe a concealed carry? We won't talk about who that is. Okay. We won't talk about who that is. We don't want to give away too much information, but we do have somebody who's concealed carry. Is this an every week thing? Does this ever change, or is somebody designated to hold that position? Okay, it isn't all the time. It isn't all the time thing. Okay. So this is a crisis team bag that Mountain Home Public Schools has put together, and this is something that we kind of utilize every day within our schools that is beneficial for should our teachers and students find themselves dealing with a crisis, whether that is a tornado drill or some type of active shooter event or a fire alarm. They grab this bag that we call a red bag that has different types of crisis materials in it. Sometimes they carry things like basic medical supplies. They carry things like rosters. They carry snacks in there for kids who might have diabetic problems or issues, maybe extra batteries or even a solar blanket. Okay, so we'll talk about why these are important here in just a little bit. There's just some basic needs with that. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, this is kind of our outline for how this class is going to look. Our basic outline is we're going to talk about disaster response psychology. So once we kind of figure out how we can train our brain, the rest of the stuff is pretty easy, okay? But we got to get right in our head first before we can make any decisions. Whenever it comes to active shooter or active killer events, it's really critical for us to think about the people who respond correctly versus how those that don't respond correctly and what was going on and the amount of stress that their bodies carried. So just because I'm a police officer doesn't mean that my body doesn't naturally respond to the same amount of stress as any of yours would if we were put in the same critical event together. But I can honestly say that because I work pretty hard at it. I mean, it takes a lot of work to continually train my brain to make these decisions should something happen. I can say that I would respond pretty well to these types of incidents, okay? We'll also talk about different active shooter events. We'll kind of do a little bit of a case study, and then we'll talk about what your response looks like as civilians. All right, so by definition, an active shooter event is defined as, by the Federal Bureau of Investigations, as an active shooter event involves one or more persons engaged in killing or attempting to kill multiple people in an area occupied by multiple unrelated individuals. Essentially, y'all, it is attempted mass murder. In a lot of these events that we'll kind of discuss pretty briefly today, a lot of these events we didn't have any victims whatsoever, or we had very limited, okay? But the act itself involves one individual or more attempting to commit mass murder, okay? A lot of times they're not very successful. Do you think that we hear about those not so successful events in the news? No, which ones do we hear about pretty often? Yeah, the ones that have mass casualties involved, and typically who involved in those mass casualties? Children, okay? We talk about those events because they're devastating, okay? They're devastating to think that somebody would try to come in and murder children, okay? Is anybody familiar with the Sutherland Springs shooting that occurred in Texas, the Baptist church killings that occurred? Okay, so we'll talk about that case study here in just a little bit. Okay, so the 3 stages of disaster response. This is a method that was created by an author named Amanda Ripley. In 2008, she created a book based off of research that she had called The Unthinkable. And in her studies and her research, she came to the conclusion that people who go through these 3 very distinct phases, the faster you move through these phases, the more likely you are to be successful in your survival. The faster you move from the denial phase to a decisive moment, the more likely you are to survive. She talks about the struggles for those who stay or stuck within that denial phase. There's no way this person came into my church with a gun and is going to try to kill me. There's no way that my brain can comprehend that something bad is happening right now. So she talks about how people move quickly through those 3 phases, and those who move faster through them are more likely to survive and take fellow survivors with them. So we're going to watch this video real fast. This is on social proofing. Social proofing kind of goes along with the denial phase. Okay, so we'll talk more on denial. I just kind of want you guys to get a feel for what social proofing kind of entails, and this very poignant experiment that occurred just outside of New York City. So I'm fixing to play this video. Oh, hold on. You may have to click it.
Place like this street in New York City, if you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help! Help!
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help me. Help me, sir. Please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is 2 conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help, and it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You alright? You alright?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You want to sit up?
She don't look well, does she?
You alright, yeah? Yes, you are.
First I thought she was dead. Then I checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm alright.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
While you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so I'd just like to check that he was okay.
And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
Okay, that's pretty interesting, to say the least, isn't it? So to watch people conform to the idea that, gosh, I want to get involved, but that would go against the norm. Believe it or not, that's honestly how a lot of people respond to those types of things. That may have not been a fire or an active shooter event, but that is something that is outside of our traditional daily life, wouldn't you say, to see somebody laying on the street? So it's important to remember that in social proofing, we are looking around to see what type of reaction everybody else is giving. So kind of think about it like this. To social proof would be if I walked into a fancy dinner party. I never do that. I walk into a fancy dinner party with all kinds of utensils and glasses and plates and napkins and fancy dinnerware everywhere around me, and I take a seat, and the meal begins. I wouldn't know the first utensil to pick up, okay? If it's not a spork, all right, I have a 10 and 8-year-old just on the other side of those pews. If it's not a spork, I don't know what I'm working with here, okay? But for me to be able to social proof, to conform to the remainder of the room, what do you think I would do? I'd probably look around, right, and take a glance at what everybody else is picking up. If everybody else is picking up the second fork to the left, that's probably the fork that I'm going to pick up. So what's interesting about social proofing is that we do this in our daily lives whether we know it or not, okay? But to be able to train our brain that we are not to conform to the new and ambiguous by laying there and allowing this to move past us without making a decision is kind of what we're going to encourage today, okay? Okay, so the denial phase is the phase that we do not want to stay in, folks, okay? The denial phase is basically sitting here, sitting in your office, standing in Walmart shopping casually, and you hear something that you feel is a firework go off around you. How typical is it to hear a firework go off at the College of North Street Church of Christ? That's pretty rare, wouldn't you say? Okay, I would lean towards the side of that's probably never going to happen, okay? And if that ever does happen, that's something to really take into consider about how we need to kind of handle those types of issues, okay? How rare is it to think that somebody would walk into our office building and light off a firecracker? We can sit here and armchair quarterback it all day long and say, that'd be pretty easy for me to stand up and move. But because it's new and ambiguous and it has nothing to do with our traditional day, I promise it's a lot more difficult than just sitting here and kind of, again, armchair quarterbacking it, okay? So the denial phase is just basically saying, there is no way this is going on right now, okay? So we're going to move from that phase and move straight to deliberation. Deliberation within our mind, within the psychology of our mind, is essentially saying, hey, okay, there's no way that somebody would walk into this greater room right here with a firecracker and light it off. There is something going on. I may not know exactly what the problem is, but something is not right, and I have to make a decision on how I'm going to handle this. Okay, so the deliberation phase is exactly where I need everybody to move should they find themselves in an event that's critical, okay? Don't sit there and assume it's a firework. Don't assume that maybe something fell. It's okay to react accordingly, turn around and backtrack. Okay, that's okay. I tell my kids and staff this all the time, if you think something feels wrong, it's okay to go into a lockdown. It's okay to take care of yourself. We can always fix things. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you to do that today. So I talked earlier about how the psychology and stress amongst humans is something that's really going to turn a corner for us on what kind of moment we decide to make if we find ourselves in these situations. So this is a stress response model that we not only teach our police officers, but we teach the community too. Because again, we're all the same creatures, I just have this shiny badge on, okay? And I wear a gun that sometimes hurts my back occasionally. All right, but this stress response model is no different from how I would respond to something critical and how you would respond to something critical. So how we teach our police officers to deal with stress is we show them this model and we talk about, hey, this is kind of how your body works through the calls that you go to every day. So in law enforcement, I can tell you that it is a constant up and down and up and down. And it's not this pretty coast where we just go through the mountains. Nope, it's straight and sometimes it's straight down, okay? It can be very straight. This is why I have grays all the time, okay? So it is a very stressful job, but we talk about why stress is so important, because the minute we can harness stress is the minute that we can make a better decision for ourselves when we are under extreme duress. Okay, we can still think critically even when we are under extreme circumstances. So for example, at 60 beats per minute, this is everybody in this room right now. Okay, everybody in this room has got a well-oxygenated system going on. You've got critical thoughts moving through your head right now, but you're relaxed, okay? Not a lot sparking, piquing your emotions at this point, okay? Maybe just thinking about some of the things that I've talked about so far. But this is a pretty casual feeling. This is as if you're sitting in your lazy boy on a Monday evening. At 90 beats per minute, this is where you have more situational awareness. You see things that are going on around you, and you're kind of heightened. You've got a heightened state of awareness. At 120 beats per minute, this would be as if you're sitting in your lazy boy and you hear somebody outside of your home and they have attempted to make entry into your home. Okay, you are fully aware that there is something critical going on and that something has got to be done. Okay, whether you go and address it or you wait for them to come into the residence. At 150 beats per minute, this is where somebody has made entry into your home. Okay, let's say somebody has broken into your home. This is you fixing to deal with a major problem, no matter how that looks for you. At 175 beats per minute, this is where we essentially begin to avoid our bowels. So when we talk about people who have been involved in and who have passed away as a result of these critical incidents, oftentimes, y'all, they hit that 175 beats per minute and they freeze in time. Their body cannot tell them to move or think critically, and they ultimately wait to pass away. Okay, so whenever you see these types of events go on in the media, think to yourself, how many of these people could not think through this situation to make a decision to better help their survivability? I think you'd be surprised at that, okay? Some of the events that kind of come to mind whenever I think about people who lost their lives as a result of 175 beats per minute, and that's cooking it, guys. That's really pumping them out there. Some of the events that I can think of is Pulse nightclub. Is anybody familiar with the Pulse nightclub shooting? That was pretty brutal. Almost 50 people lost their lives as a result of that. And watching some of the body camera footage, you see where people are just literally frozen in time while this person is almost laying waste to their life. Okay, they're waiting for their opportunity, and they don't take it. Another event that kind of comes to mind is the Las Vegas shooting. Is anybody familiar with the Las Vegas shooting, Route 91? Okay, that was pretty critical because people had vast open areas to run to, and a lot of them couldn't. Okay, they were frozen in time and could not move. So for a police officer at 90 beats per minute, just to kind of backtrack back down again, at 90 beats per minute, this is where we start to lose our fine motor skill. What do you think a fine motor skill would be for a police officer? So a fine motor skill that I would think about would be taking my keys and inserting my key into the door of my school. Okay, that's a fine motor skill that I would lose. And this is, again, just some of the psychology that we have as police officers. At 120 beats per minute, this is where we start to begin to lose our gross motor skills. Okay, so things like being able to reach up to my lapel mic and speak into it as I'm running down the hallway. That's a gross motor skill that we could lose. At 150 beats per minute, for a police officer, that's where things, and just the general public, that's things like our auditory exclusion shuts down. Okay, we start to have things like tunnel vision. We start to experience out-of-body experiences. We have things like time dilation where what our surroundings are slowing down. Okay, why do you think that our body responds in those types of ways whenever our heart rate is that high? What is our body telling us that it needs to protect? What's it telling us that we're trying to protect here? Self-preservation. Where do you think, from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet, where do you think our self-preservation would lie in our physical body? It's going to lie from our neck to our navel. Okay? So what do you think's the first to go? Our critical thinking skills. Okay, so our critical thinking skills are the first to go. because our body is trying to say, hey, I'm protecting from here to here, okay? So the last thing that our body cares about is if you can hear anything. The last thing it cares about is if you can see anything. It wants to keep your heart pumping and wants to keep your vital organs going as well, okay? So at 150 beats per minute, we tell police officers, hey, you've got to take some deep breaths, reoxygenate your blood, get that blood flowing back to your head so that you can make critical movements in these events, okay? So in a school, at my school I have 700 kids. Officer Mays has 700 kids at his school. At the high school we have 1,000. One block over at Hackler we have another 1,000. Okay, so that's a whole lot of moving parts, moving bodies everywhere. And we have to be able to accurately take care of any type of threat that comes our way. But in order to do that, I have to control the stress within my own body. So we're going to do a breathing exercise together, okay, because for police officers, something that we tell them whenever we exercise and do our trainings every year with them in the summertime, we hand them a gun, we stick them in a hallway, and we say, this is our scenario, and they have to play it out, okay? So ammunition rounds are exchanged. We have people who actually play victims as if they've been injured critically, and we put them in a hallway and we say, you got to go take care of the bad guy. How are you going to do that? So we push them down the hallway, and there's points and times where myself and Officer Mays and our partners have to stop the officer and say, take a deep breath, okay? Bring your heart rate back down, because at 120 beats per minute, you bleed less, you're faster, and you're stronger. So that means that even a police officer can take a bullet, okay? They can take some type of physical injury to themselves, and they're even stronger than they were before that injury occurred, okay? But we have to get them back to that critical marker, which is 120 beats per minute. The same goes for our general public. Again, we're no different than you all. Okay, so we're going to do this breathing exercise together, and this is something that can ultimately reduce your beats per minute between 20 and 30, depending on where you're at. If you're at the 150 beats per minute and you've got cognition that's beginning to just fall apart, like you can't make a decision, you're having an issue even deciding on what to do or what way to go, or what's really just figuring out what's going on around you, you can do this breathing exercise and it'll bring your beats per minute down to a critical level that will help you be better, faster, and stronger, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to take a 2-second breath in through your nose. I want you to hold it for 2 seconds, exhale through your mouth, okay? So are we ready? Hold it. Let's do it again. Okay? That's what we call combat breathing. This is what do we teach our police officers? You've got to take 2 or 3 seconds to take care of yourself before you go in there and deal with these problems, okay? Because running down the hallway, running down a 60-yard hallway with all of this gear on and a big heavy rifle when they're trying to do these critical tasks is difficult, because at the end of it, when they get to the end and the barrel of the weapon is doing this, do you think that's very safe? Definitely not. But if we can take a few seconds to get that police officer reintegrated back into a decent level of breathing, guess what the front of that gun does? It levels out. It's really no different for our communities. You can think more critically when you have an oxygenated amount of blood pumping through to your brain to make critical decisions. The stress response, do you guys have any questions on stress response? Again, it's all about the psychology, because once you get the psychology down, you can start making decisions and changing the course of action. Okay. So everybody here has 2 brains. I have 2 brains. Mr. Cameron's got 2 brains. I'm going to keep using Mr. Cameron and probably Tim because I know these guys. But everybody here operates off of 2 brains. It's human nature. So the first brain that we have is obviously the human brain. This is going to be the brain that is critical. It's rational. It takes time to think. We are reflective. Okay, we reflect on what our decisions are. The lizard brain, however, is irrational. It's quick to respond, okay? It's emotional, it's fast, it's not deliberate, okay? This is the brain that has natural reaction behind it. You don't have to think in this one. This is your natural response. So what's interesting about the human brain is the longer we can keep our human brain functioning, the better we can utilize and integrate the lizard brain in us, okay? So by doing that and understanding the stress response that your particular body is going through, the more critical you can think, the longer you can hang on to your human brain. Because whenever it comes to these types of events, the minute we start going through these events and the stress in our body raises, it's the faster that our human brain kind of goes out the window. Okay, so we kind of tip the scales whenever it comes to critical thinking. What's interesting about the lizard brain is you can use that to your advantage because, again, that's the one that's fast. It's irrational. It can make very fast decisions, honestly, without thinking. So if you can use those types of critical thinking skills from your human brain and then react with your lizard brain, the survival rate that you have goes up exponentially. Does that make sense? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more on how each side of your brain kind of operates within these events. So the human brain is the fight, flight, and freeze. Okay, this is the part of our brain that tells us which one of these factors we're going to pick. And those are the three factors that we pick from. We fight, we run, or we freeze. And again, we go back to talking about these critical incidents where multiple people pass away. And yes, it's unfortunate, and yes, a lot of it is beyond their control whenever it comes to the type of weapons that's used by the people who perpetrate this. That's something that we can't help. But a lot of these people ultimately freeze and they wait to have their life taken from them. Okay. Who is familiar with the Station nightclub fire? Anybody familiar with the Station nightclub fire? Okay, I got one back there. Okay, so the Station nightclub fire happened in West Warwick, Rhode Island. I have to slow down and say that each and every time. In February of 2003. Okay, February of 2003. Anybody familiar with the band Great White? Okay, I'm seeing, yeah, they had a couple hits. Okay, I won't lie. I'm kind of a fan of Great White, all right? But what we did was we had Great White go and headline at Station Nightclub. So Station Nightclub was a single-story nightclub. It was a single layout. It was a fairly large nightclub, but it had exponentially a large amount of people that day, okay, that came out to watch Great White. They were the headliners. Had about 450 people show up to this particular event, well beyond the fire marshal's capacity for the building itself, okay? So Station Nightclub is significant for those of you all who are here for this craze class tonight because I want you to watch the type of social proofing that occurs, now that we know what social proofing is, the type of social proofing that occurs within this particular nightclub. So in this nightclub, the gentleman that's filming this video happens to be a local reporter, and he's reporting on Great White being there presenting their show to that area. And what you'll see happen in the background is they create and light illegal pyrotechnics. Okay, so they do not receive a permit to be able to light off pyrotechnics, but they lit them off anyway. So you see the pyrotechnics go off within the first 10 seconds of the show starting, and it immediately lights the roof on fire. Okay, so it lights off the soundproofing foam that's just directly behind the band. Okay, I want you to watch as this video, it's not the best quality, and I apologize for that, but what I want you to watch is what goes on in the crowd. Okay, I want you to watch the people who can literally see flames within just a few feet of them begin to engulf the entire building, and they stand there and look around to see what everybody else is doing. And then we'll talk about what happens after that. Nick, you might have to do it. Okay, so the clock started. Can everybody see the pyrotechnics in the background? All right, so observe the crowd. By now the ceiling is on fire. And look at the dance crowd. You even have some people that are still fist bumping, ready for them to continue to play. So at 30 seconds, the fire alarm begins to sound, and everybody's ready to move out of the denial phase and figure out what they want to do. Okay, so that alarm starts going off and people start thinking, holy cow, something's happening. I don't know what, but something's happening. They begin to move through the main entrance and push their way out. At 1 minute, you can see just how fast that escalated. So there's a woman screaming in the background, "Where's my husband? Where's my husband?" And before we move on from this slide, 100 people passed away as a result of this fire, and almost 250 people received really significant injuries, burns throughout their entire body, okay? Very significant injuries as a result of this. So this is the Station nightclub fire layout, and I don't have a pointer, I don't think. Do I have a pointer on this? Okay, that's okay. So I don't know if you can see this very well, but there are 4 primary exits, 4 exterior exits from within this particular building. There's one exit in the front, which is where you saw the cameraman exit out of. There's one at the main bar, which is number 3 back here. There's always one at the kitchen, always, without a doubt. And then there's one that exits directly behind the stage. Okay, so that's where the band was at. Along this exit right here, the main entrance hall, is a bank of windows. So it's windows from where that entrance is all the way to the end of the building. So in this grid, this is the layout of where the deceased were found once the fire was put out. So in all, 31 people passed away at the entrance of Station nightclub fire. You had 18 on the other side of the door there at the main entrance, 9 that was within the dance floor, and then about 30 in the back side. Okay. What's interesting about this fire and the social proofing behind it, did anybody notice what I was talking about? Like, they literally are watching flames engulfing behind the band, and people are standing wanting to know what everybody else is going to do. Well, if they're not going to overreact, I'm certainly not going to overreact. Have you guys ever seen that in person within your life? I promise you I have, okay? And it's absolutely mind-boggling to kind of watch some of this happen. But again, I'm armchair quarterbacking a little bit. What's interesting about Mountain Home Junior High School is whenever we allow the kids to come in from outside, we have 4 doors, and there's 2 on each side that kind of open up and fan out, just like a French door. So every single day, we open up all 4 doors, and every single day, we push open all 4 doors. And about 50 kids will come through, and then we'll have a few stragglers, and the doors will slam behind them. What do you think happens to those doors that slam behind those kids? Do you think that they're ever opened back up again to allow the flow of traffic to get into the school easier? No. No. So all 300 of them will filter through one of the 4 doors, okay? So I say all that because it's interesting to watch in this video just how many people tried to go back out the entrance that they were familiar with. They never had any idea that there was not only that entrance available, but 3 others, and that entire bank of windows. So the windows remained intact, not a single person came through the windows. In this video, it's very difficult to watch. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I would encourage it because it's very humbling to me. But to watch the video is a little difficult at the end because of what is seen, and I think we have it available. We don't. In this particular picture, the cameraman pans back around, and you see bodies stacked from the floor to the ceiling of that one particular entrance. Okay, and those are the 31 people who ended up perishing in that fire as a result of the decision to go back out through the entrance. So what do you think happened? Why do you think we had bodies stacked from the floor to the ceiling? Well, they panicked, and then they kind of stampeded. Okay, so they did every attempt that they could to push forward, and then they just kind of got backlogged. Okay, so the bodies were, that's where they were. This is one of the most interesting events that's ever happened, strictly because it was caught on film, but B, just to watch the social proofing that occurred within that particular event.
It's going to take a few seconds to realize that this is not part of the show.
Yes, correct. And if you noticed, it really was just within a few seconds that you see the flames hit the ceiling, and then they continue to hit the ceiling, and then they begin to spread. So about the time you see the cameraman back up, should have been the cue for everybody else, we got to get out of here, okay? Why do you think exit 4 wasn't utilized?
It's towards the fire.
Towards the fire, right? It's towards the fire. But for a good majority of the people who were in that area, that probably would have been the best avenue for escape. But again, that is new and ambiguous, and that is scary to us as human beings to think, oh my goodness, I could possibly get injured as a result of this. Okay, it's human nature. All right, so to kind of compare that with police officers, we have to fight through this. Okay, we train our officers. If you get shot, that's cool. You got to keep going. Just because you take a round doesn't mean that you're dead. Okay. That's not how it's always been, but that's how it is these days. We're going to train you to stay in the fight, okay? Our communities are no different. We got to get you all to stay in the fight, okay? Sometimes it looks like a fire, other times it looks like an active killer event. Okay, so in deliberation, here's some things that you can do to help move you through again to that faster, decisive moment. Because again, we're not going to stay in denial very long, right? We're not going to think that in church somebody's lighting off a firework. We're not going to think that a pyrotechnic show that's lighting the ceiling on fire is part of the show. Okay, we got to move right on out of that. But in deliberation, we're going to calm ourselves. We're going to do our combat breathing that we talked about. And it's okay to shift your emotion because you're going to be what? Absolutely scared to death. Okay? Anybody that thinks that the police are bulletproof, that we have no emotions, are crazy. Okay? I'm a little bit of an emotional person. I think this is why I work with kids, because, you know, we just love all the high fives and happy moments. So, and I'm a mom of kids, so, you know, emotions are they're ingrained in me every single day. But it's okay to be scared. That's totally fine and normal to be scared. But shifting our emotion to be a more useful emotion in that particular moment is what we're going to encourage you all to do. Shift from being scared to being mad. How dare you walk into my church and hurt my family members? How dare you walk in here and decide that this is what you're going to do? We can take that away from them, okay? We can take away their motive, all right? That's what we're here for today. Mental scripting. This is one of my very favorite things to do with my kids. I bet their heads are going to pop up here in just a minute. But my 8 and 10-year-old are around the corner. They're on their tablets, because all kids these days need is a snack and a little bit of Wi-Fi, and they're pretty good. So that's what they have. That's why they're being extra quiet over there. But in deliberation, and we constantly script and practice, constantly. And I'm sure that I kind of come across as a little bit of a crazy person, if anybody could ever be a fly on a wall and hear our conversations. But here's why this works. So here's an example of some of the scripting that we do with my family. So my husband is also a police officer. He's a 25-year veteran with Baxter County Sheriff's Office, a night shift patrol officer. So he gets it, okay? This is something that he's passionate about as well. So my 10-year-old over there, she's only about 60 pounds soaking wet. And my 8-year-old, she's 8, okay? She's 8. But we can walk into Chili's, one of our favorite places to eat. We can walk into Chili's any given day, take a seat at a table, and I can say, a man with a gun walks in right now, what are you doing? And they will sit up and they will examine the room and they'll say, well, Mom, we're pretty close to the kitchen. Okay, cool, what's in the kitchen right now? What do you know is in the kitchen? Well, I know for a fact that every kitchen has a what? Has an exit, okay? Okay, let's say that he comes around the corner and you don't have the ability to get to that kitchen to get out. Where would you go from here? What's plan B? Well, Mom, we're sitting pretty close to a window right now. Okay, what would you do with that? I'd probably bust the window out. Okay, what are you going to do with that? Because my 10-year-old, again, she's 60 pounds. Okay, the wind blows the right way and that kid's being taken off. All right? I call her a bird because I think she's got hollow bones. I really think that she does. But what do we have available at Chili's? What's always sitting on the table at Chili's? The napkin holder. Anybody seen those cool little gaming screens and the self-pay? Because nobody wants to take our card anymore. Okay? So those kiosks are there that you slide your card into. That thing's like a brick. Okay? And I'll say, what are you going to do with that? Well, I'm probably going to lob that through the window, Mom. Okay? Now, you're probably going to get cut on the way out. Is that okay? It's better than not going home, Mom. Okay. All right. There's plans 1 and plans 2 should something happen. We walk into Walmart. Which door did you walk into? Well, I walked into the door where the groceries are. Okay, so that's called the what? This is the grocery side. Okay, cool. So if a man with a gun walks up to you right now, where can you go? Well, I can turn around and run out. Or where else? Well, the deli's right here. I could go straight to the deli and walk out that door. Okay, cool. Or you can do what? You can run right past him if you needed to and go straight out the backside. Okay? Again, how many exits are there in Walmart? 17. Good thing. We also have things like ladders that are available, those fire escape ladders that go straight up to the roof. Okay? Those are an option that you can consider. So we continually mental script constantly what we're going to do in the event that something happens. It takes 15 seconds, and they're 8 and 10. Okay, so we always have a family plan because they know that Mom is probably going to have to go and do something about it, that Dad is probably going to have to go and do something about it. Okay, so they may be on their own for a couple minutes. I would encourage you all to do the exact same with your families and loved ones. If you walk into a restaurant, have a game plan. If someone walks in here right now trying to kill me, what am I going to do? If that doesn't work, what's my secondary plan? It takes 30 seconds. Build that plan so if somebody does walk in, you already have half of it, you already have half of it handed down. Okay? I'd encourage you to do that. That goes for outdoor events too. We go to concerts, and she's a fast pitch softball player, so we go to ball fields all the time where there are thousands of people there all day, every day, and we continually have a plan. Continually have a plan. 30 seconds can ultimately save your life. Okay, so really practice and script that. Any questions on that so far? We do that at school. We do that at school. Ironically. One is a hall monitor, okay? And I think the teacher did that on purpose because she knows that both Mom and Dad are police officers. But yeah, they understand that, hey, this is some training that Mom and Dad have given me. And I understand that in a moment where I might have to make a decision that could help save myself and somebody else, that's probably what I'm going to have to do. They also understand that, hey, you need to have a very good understanding that you might get hurt, okay? Like, are you good with that? Yeah, Mom, I'm good with that. Okay, we'll call it a cool battle scar, okay? Like, kids are all about battle scars, all right? Consider battle scars to be a win, okay? Because I would rather come and visit somebody in the hospital with wounds than to go to their funeral because they didn't make a decision. I tell my kids that all the time. If we're going to go out, if we're going to lose our lives, we're going to go out fighting, okay? And they agree with that. That's not easy to tell an 8 and 10-year-old, but they know you better make a decision, okay? So now we're going to talk about time for action in this decisive moment. All right. In our decisive moment, this is a map. This is the most current map that we have through Alert and Craze. This is going to go from 2000 to 2022, and it's going to map out in the United States exactly where each and every single active killer event, active attack event has occurred. Anything in yellow represents a gun, anything in red represents a knife, and anything in blue represents a vehicle, because not all weapon systems fall on guns. Is that what we typically hear about in the news? Yeah. So in one event, I don't know if anybody recalls this, but in one event in New York City, an individual stole a Home Depot truck and ultimately killed 8 people and injured 15 as a result of this. That was considered a mass attack event, okay? Didn't hear a lot about it because it didn't involve a gun, okay? But there's not necessarily one specific weapon system that we have to talk about that fits the mold for everything, okay? You see how they're just popping up like chicken pox everywhere now? As the years progress forward, we see more and more and more happen. We're getting there. Anybody see those in the state of Arkansas? We do have several within Arkansas. We'll show you here in just a second. 464 to date, okay? Does 464 events nationwide. Do you all remember hearing about 464 events? No. We're not here to talk about the media or agendas or anything like that. We're just simply here to talk about these events are happening at a very fast rate, okay? And they are not slowing down. They're not slowing down because, again, we don't focus strictly on just the gun weapon system, okay? This is overall anything that can be used as a weapon system, and I promise you that there are folks out there who use multi-weapon system events. So one of those events is the University of California in Santa Barbara. Does anybody remember that a couple years back? 2016, where a shooter killed 4 people at his residence. Then he went and retrieved a gun and shot multiple people on campus, or excuse me, a knife, killed multiple people on campus, and then he got into a car and ran over even more. So he was a 3-system offender in this, okay? So they're starting to think outside the box, y'all, okay? They got nothing but time to think about how much waste can I create as a result of my plan that I execute. It varies. It honestly varies. A vast majority of them kill themselves prior to law enforcement arrival. Why do you think that is? The deed is done. Okay, the deed is done. They have taken their revenge on what they need, and they can move on. They can say that their plan is ultimately followed through, and a lot of them take their own lives as a result of it. So has anybody been following the Parkland shooting verdict? Consecutive life sentences for each one of those victims. He was one that didn't kill himself as a result of it. Aurora, Colorado, at the theater shooting, he's also another one that survived through it. Some of the ones that come to mind who took their own lives, Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook took his own life prior to law enforcement arrival. Okay, they don't have a rhyme or reason behind it. We really don't. Okay, so that was a great question because it leads us into the shooter. So our shooter, y'all, we really don't have a profile. We can talk about these 464 events from 2000 to now that we really don't have a mold that fits our particular shooter, okay? We don't have a profile, so to speak, okay? Some are old, some are young. We have some of those who are my age, kind of right in the middle, the mid-30s. We have male shooters. Most of the time it's male shooters, but we do have, more often than not, these days, we have female shooters as well. They're black, they're white, they're Hispanic, they're all types of ethnic backgrounds. Okay, so we really can't pinpoint anybody. I don't know about you all, but that makes me a little bit nervous to just think that anybody around me has the potential to do this, okay? Not to make anybody paranoid, but to just make you a little bit more situationally aware. They oftentimes have things like an avenger mindset, okay? Something critical has happened to them within their life that they feel they have to avenge what has happened to them. They feel bullied, they're detached. Oftentimes they have to seek revenge by broadcasting what their intentions are. Who here has ever seen or read any kind of interviews where someone has said, you know, they kind of started acting different, but I really didn't think about saying anything about it? Those are our broadcasters, okay? The shooter for Virginia Tech had a manifesto that he had mailed out to the media the day before, and it reached their doorstep as he was going through and executing his plan. We had others, University of California, Santa Barbara, that was broadcasted live. King Soper Marketplace shooting earlier this year, that was broadcasted live on Facebook. Okay, so they are becoming more bold and more inventful with how they broadcast. Okay. The Memphis? Yes. Yep. That was, which is interesting. That's just a few hours away from here. So they are, I mean, they're detached. They feel like they have to get their point across by taking out and taking care of what has been done wrong to them. Okay, so there are some commonalities that we'll find with these shooters. Oftentimes they have poor support systems at home. They have mental health problems. They have substance abuse addiction, those types of things. Those are some of the commonalities, but as far as a profile goes, we really don't have anything. Okay, does this really kind of shock anybody to see location of attacks where these happen? So it was shocking to me whenever I went through this class first to see that education was not first, because again, why do we see these types of things in the news? Why do we see school shootings in the news? Probably more than anything else. Yeah, it involves kids, right? Kids are the epitome of innocence and the epitome of sweet, okay, of heartfelt feelings. That's what kids are, okay? They tug at our heartstrings. I think that's why we work with kids, is because that's kind of what they do for me, okay? They kind of tug at my heart a little bit. But education still, everyone, is still relatively safe, okay? Here in Mountain Home, Arkansas, we're safe, okay? We have police officers on every single campus, all day, every day, okay? But in Commerce, those are the types of things like your businesses, your small businesses, places like Walmart. Unfortunately, we've had multiple shootings at places like Walmart and those big conglomerate agencies, okay? Private places, private businesses where maybe there's a lot of people, all right? Outdoor events, and this has swapped within just the last few days. Outdoor events has swapped with education, so education is now at about the 18 to 20% mark. Okay, they only take up about 18 to 20%, and outdoors has flip-flopped to about 25%. Commerce is at 50%, so 50% of those 464 events have happened at a commercialized area. Okay, does that make sense? Education, again, is still relatively safe. A lot of why this flip-flopped is because of the places like the Route 91 Festival in Las Vegas. That took up a lot. 59 people died as a result of that. Okay, so that kind of factors into certain things. The shooter connection at these particular locations, 45% have no connection versus 5% who do have a connection. When we talk about connection, we talk about things like former employee or employee, student, former student, those types of things, something that they have an affiliation to that particular attack location versus no connection whatsoever. That's pretty alarming to me to see that much of a similar breakdown there on the graph, okay? That random people, again, people like the Colorado shooting there within the movie theater, no connection whatsoever, but look at the damage that he created there. Dang it, okay. All right, so here's two factors that we need to consider here. And again, this is why CRAZE is so important. The number of deaths that these events have really depend on how quickly the police arrive and target availability. Okay, target availability is something that will factor into this. Creating things that we call soft targets. Children are soft targets because they genuinely have no way of fighting back. In school, the only person that should have a gun on a campus is the school resource officer. Okay, that's the only person. Nobody else should have a gun on campus. So those are what we call soft targets. Okay, in the mind of these killers, they want a vast majority to suffer. Okay, they want large numbers, soft targets that are available. So again, when we talk about being in places like church, being in school, being at places like Walmart or an outdoor event, those are the places that are more likely, and it's not always going to happen, but more likely for those types of things to happen at. Okay, when we talk about response time, this is the national average for response time. The national average for response time for law enforcement is 3 minutes. That's a pretty good amount of time. Okay, that's really good. That's kicking it in high gear and getting there and starting to deal with the event. Okay, 3 minutes is pretty good. What do you think Mountain Home, Arkansas, what do you think Mountain Home Police Department's response would be on an event that would be critical enough to consider like mass casualty? Say that one more time. Okay, under 3. What would you ballpark it at? 90 seconds? Yeah, I'd say 90 seconds to 2 minutes at most, okay? At most. We could be anywhere in the city within just about 90 seconds. Okay, so that's a really excellent response time, but think about places like Baxter County. Okay, so I know that my husband tonight has 2 deputies working. 2, okay? If an event happened at Lone Rock Church of Christ, Lone Rock Baptist, if something happened tonight, that could be a nightmare. Okay, that could be 45 to 50 minutes response time. Okay? What we're going to encourage today is, although it's 90 seconds, a whole lot can happen in 90 seconds. Okay, a whole lot. So dependent on how our community responds within those 90 seconds prior to our arrival will really help the survivability of the people involved in that. Okay, so yes, it's an excellent time, and I mean, I'm going to pat our guys on the back because they're going to get there and they're going to take care of business. I know they will, but 90 seconds is a lot of time for things to happen. Okay, denial. Again, we're not going to deny that we hear gunshots. We're going to move straight into deliberation. Within deliberation, we're going to talk about things known as avoid, deny, and defend. Okay? And Officer Mays is going to talk about this. This is what I want you to ingrain in your brain right now. Burn that image right there in your brain, okay? Avoid, deny, defend. These are your 3 options that we want to encourage you all to take part in should you ever find yourself in one of these events, okay? So this is going to be where I end my portion of things, but this is important to talk about situational awareness. And I want you to observe not only the social proofing, okay, but I want you to observe how these people respond to an event as critical as the Panama City School Board shooting. Has anybody ever watched or has anybody ever heard about the Panama City School Board shooting? Okay, so this was, have you seen it, Chief? Okay. All right, so this is a pretty interesting video to say the least. It's about 8 minutes long. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I would encourage you to watch it on YouTube. Just type in Panama City School Board shooting from 2011. I believe it's 2011. And basically what happens, 2010, excuse me, it's 2010. So basically what happens within this incident is this is live streamed. Okay, so this is Panama City School Board in Florida. And the gentleman that you see in front of you is Mr. Holzfeld, and that is the superintendent for the school district. Okay, so they're having their board meeting, and they're discussing some of their agenda that they have. The video is put on Mr. Holzfeld, and then you hear a gentleman from the back say, "I have a motion." He says, "I have a motion," and he stands up, and you hear in the back spray painting going on, okay? In law enforcement, that's what we call a clue. So, would you say that it is typical for you to see in a setting style like this, somebody to take a spray can and spray paint something on a wall? Okay, no, not typical. That is not typical. That should be where we move straight to a deliberation phase like, that ain't right. Okay, I don't know what this cat's doing, but it ain't right. And we're fixing to make a decision on what to do. So he stands up and he takes a spray paint can and he sprays a massive V on the wall and then he circles it. Well, in 2010, what movie was new and introduced? V for Vendetta. Okay, V for Vendetta. So he writes this V for Vendetta because he has a vendetta against the school board because his wife was previously fired as a result of some type of personnel policy, okay, violation. So his wife ended up being terminated from Panama City schools, and the benefits that they were receiving for unemployment had in fact run out, okay? So this gentleman who comes into light is this woman's husband. And he basically says, our benefits are up, and I'm going to die here today. okay? After he does that, he brandishes a 9mm Smith & Wesson and begins to point it and brandish it at the school board. So as things kind of progress on, I want you to watch how the crowd reacts to that. Okay? I want you to watch the women that are right up front, and I want you to watch the women that are strategically placed there in the school board itself, and how they handle this type of stress and what they do under pressure, how they perform under pressure. Eventually what happens is they begin to have conversation with this guy. Things escalate, and he again says over and over again, I'm gonna die today. I'm gonna die today. So he brandishes this gun and eventually walks right up to the superintendent, points it at the superintendent's face, and you see the superintendent lean back and say, I don't want to die, please don't kill me, please don't kill me, okay? If someone points a gun at you, it is okay to fight back, and by fighting back, what do you think I mean for that? Am I asking you to stand up and bum rush this guy and try to wrestle that gun away from him? No. But I am going to ask you to get up and make a decision to save your own life. Okay, so this gentleman chose to sit and remain seated in his seat. And the gentleman points the gun at his head and he says, basically, you're going out with me. Okay, so he fires a few rounds off and the superintendent clutches his chest as if he's been shot. Okay, lucky for him, this guy intentionally missed because he was an expert marksman within the military, and he was dishonorably discharged as a result of an aggravated stalking charge, okay? So he intentionally missed the superintendent, okay? But I want you to think about how he reacts and why he would clutch his chest the way that he did. Why do you think that would happen? Because if someone points a gun at you and pulls the trigger, what does your mind think? I've automatically been shot. Like there's no way this cat missed me, okay? So that's what he did. He clutches his chest and he falls backwards in his chair, but he never takes a single round. Later on at the end of the video, he stands up and he talks with a school resource officer who ends up having a gunfight with this guy, okay, and the man shoots himself. He ends up having a conversation. He tells the school resource officer, I don't know why you came in here. It was just a fake gun. Okay, it was just a fake gun. I knew that he wasn't going to hurt anybody. Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's not how you reacted. Okay, you thought that you were genuinely shot because that's the stress response that your body was put under. Okay, he didn't have the forethought to push forward and stand up and make a decision for himself to leave that area or attempt to run from that area. So I just kind of want to give you a big grand scheme picture of what happened, but please go home and watch it if you get the opportunity. I want you to take in every part of what's going on in this video. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes. Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So for those of you that couldn't hear it, basically just make a decision to do something. This guy made a decision to sit there and plead for his life even after he was argumentative with a man who had a gun in his hand, okay? You can't bring an argument to a gunfight, okay? We can't do that, all right? I'm just going to give you the heads up right now. We can't bring an argument to a gunfight, okay? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Correct. And when we take this break real fast and we switch over to Officer Mays, we're going to give you those tools, okay? That's where that avoid, deny, and defend phase comes in. That run, hide, fight phase comes into play. And you don't have to go in that order, okay? It can go from, I'm trying to avoid this guy, now I have to go hands-on and I have to fight this person because my life depends on it, okay? Those are what we're going to talk about here in the second half, okay? So I want you guys to watch this, and I want you, and again, it's a small video and I apologize, but I want you to focus and watch the women up front, and I want you to watch their reaction to it. We'll talk about it here in just a minute.
Technology to notice it's on the chart that you have there, and it's part of plan that we have, that the workshop we're going to have following this meeting, but this would be the first step in that whole process. I have a motion. Everybody in this room, behind that counter, hit the road.
And watch the women up front.
Please, certainly, you know, the women can leave. And stay. Everyone else leaves.
Notice what they're doing. We're gathering
Hey,
our
sir.
things, we're putting it
John,
on
John's just letting
pushing
talk.
our
He's
chairs.
talking. John, go ahead. Ginger, no, she's going Ginger. Ginger.
Okay. That's only a fraction of what that entire video entails, and it just gets crazier by the minute, to be honest with you. Did anybody notice the woman in the back who came back around with her purse? Okay, all right. Okay, so here's what I will say about this, okay? Do we have the right to defend ourselves? Yes. Hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives as a result of our freedoms, and I will absolutely back up defending yourself 100%. But does everybody who has the right to defend themselves necessarily have the ability to do that? Okay, this woman did not have the ability to defend herself. She had a great idea. She had great motivation behind it, and I applaud her for having the forethought to be able to go out there and try to save the day. And again, I applaud her for that, okay? But she absolutely had the ability at that point to avoid the situation by continuing to flee the situation instead of adding to it by coming back, okay? So did anybody notice up front the women that I was talking about up there? What did they do? They waited for what? Okay, so one, she ducked down and kind of got out. But the two women up front waited for permission before they got up and left the room, okay? If there is something that looks wrong, feels wrong, guess what? It's probably wrong, okay? Do not ask or wait for permission. Again, you might be hurt, you might be injured as a result of it, but we can push through an injury, okay? So when they did receive permission from the gunman to be able to stand up, what else did they do? They picked up all of their belongings, okay, and they strategically put it back on their shoulder, and the woman who was even sitting up front, the secretary, got out from underneath the chair, and she pushed the chair in eloquently, okay, because that's what? That's repetitious habits, okay? So until we start to learn and script and think about if this happens, this is exactly what I'm gonna do, we're gonna fall back on our old ways, we're gonna fall back on our lizard brain, okay? Again, we got to keep that human brain right on the forefront of things, okay? So do you all have any questions for me before I switch this over? We're going to take just a couple minutes, and I've kind of gone over just a little bit. We're going to take just a couple minutes, and then we're going to push this on to what you can do when it comes to avoid, deny, defend. Okay, all right, then we're going to swap out, so if y'all want to stretch your legs, will be just a couple minutes.
right, guys, I'll go ahead and get started with the second part if y'all want to grab your seats. Have I got everybody back? I think so. Okay. Like Sergeant Holland said, my name is Nick. I'm the SRO at Nelson Wilkes, right down the road here. I've been with the police department since 2015. This is my second year as an SRO. Before that, I worked patrol. And she kind of talked to you about the mental side of things, how to react when stress hits, making the decisions and all that, okay? And we kind of got into the run method of it. So another part on the avoid, like she talked about, think about your secondary exits, okay? Don't just think about the doors you came in or the doors you can see. Think outside the box. What can you do? She talked about breaking through windows. What's something else that you can break through if you're in a room? You got it in all your rooms in your houses. Sheetrock, okay? If you're in a room and somebody's trying to get in and you know there's another room next door that could help you get away, think about breaking through the sheetrock, okay? The deny part of it, and this is what we teach our teachers at school, okay? If we ever go into a lockdown, okay, their first goal is to lock the door, okay? District policy is that all doors are to remain locked and shut when students are present, okay? So the doors should already be locked. So the first step's out of the way, okay? The second thing we tell them to do, turn all your lights out, okay? Make it as dark as possible. Cover your windows if you can, and get out of sight. Why do you think we want them to turn the lights out and get it dark and get out of sight? That's right. The majority of the time when active attacker events, these guys, like she said, are looking for easy targets, okay? Statistically shown to the date, there's not been anyone killed behind a locked door in one of these events. Because like she said, they're looking for ease of access. So if your doors are locked, your lights are out, nobody's in there, that's what they think. So they just keep going, okay? Teachers to barricade their doors, okay? A lot of them have bookshelves or bookcases close to the door. We tell them, make sure it's easy enough for you to move. Something you can tip over, something that you can throw in front of that door, just in case you had one of those Monday morning mess ups, you forgot to lock your door, okay? We tell them the heavier the better, the more they throw in front of it, and the door stops, okay? All the doors in the district have little secondary locks on them. Just a little bar, J-hook that goes and clips into a holder on the door, okay? It's another way for them to keep people out and deny them that access. Outward opening doors, they're hard. A lot of our classroom doors are opening, but that's why we tell them to keep them locked, okay? But just in case they don't lock them, they can take ropes, cord, anything that they can tie around that door handle and hold it shut to keep somebody from getting in. Who remembers Virginia Tech? Okay. April 16th, 2017, Norris Hall. The shooter was a career exchange student who was studying at Virginia Tech. And I had some red flags come up that nobody really caught until the end. Like Officer Holland said, he had a manifesto. He mailed it the day of the shooting, okay? Before he mailed the manifesto in a dormitory across campus on the other side from Norris Hall, the shooter loaded up all his guns, loaded up all his magazines. Just so happened there was another call there of like a domestic between a boyfriend and girlfriend that wasn't even related. So the cops were already at this dormitory. So our shooter gets all of his stuff together, takes off walking across campus. Takes his manifesto, sticks it in the mailbox, goes straight to Norris Hall. Once he gets into Norris Hall, chains the door shut, off. The graph up here is just a percentage, okay? Everything you see in yellow will be the percentage of people in that room shot versus the percentage of the people killed, okay? So room 206, this is where the shooting started, okay? They took no action to try to stop this, okay? First place the shooter went in, started shooting people, okay? Once he left, he eventually came back to this room and shot more people, okay? Room 207 was the second room that the shooter entered, okay? They had a late denial, okay? We talked about the denial part, locking the door. They had a late denial. Teacher heard the gunshots, told somebody to call 911, but they couldn't get the door shut quick enough. And as you can see, 85% of the students in 207 were shot, 35% of them were killed. Let's see. Room 204 had a failed denial and a failed avoid. Professor Lebrescu, who was a Holocaust survivor, heard the shooting, heard what was going on, stepped out into the hallway, saw the shooter coming, immediately turned around, told his students to jump out the window. Now granted, they're on the second floor of the building. Professor Lebrescu stood in that doorway and gave his life for his kids. He made the decision that he was going to defend that room with his life. And that's what she talks about when it's that decisive moment. That's the kind of decision you have to make. Are you willing to put your life over the others that are with you? And then if you look at the graph, room 205 was one of the last rooms that the shooter made. The students in that room had enough time to realize what was going on, and they decided they weren't going to run, because they could have very easily ran. Room 205 in Norris Hall is at the very end of the hallway, and there's a stairwell exit. They could have ran, but they decided not to. They decided to stay. And what they did, each student laid down on their backs, put their feet on the door, other one behind them put their feet on their shoulders, and they all laid flat on the floor. Why do you think they laid flat on the floor instead of just sitting up? Mm-hmm. They knew that if they sat straight up, the shooter was going to shoot through the doors and they were going to get in. So that was the only room where nobody died. In total, 32 people were killed, 23 were injured, 17 of those were injured by gunshots. The others were injured when they jumped out of the window. So when we talk about the denial, and she talks about deliberation and all that, that's what we're talking about. If you hear a gunshot, it's a gunshot. It's not something else. Your brain's telling you that it's bad. So start working through that process. Are you going to run and try to escape? Are you going to lock yourself somewhere and try to deny the shooter entry? Or are you going to defend yourself? Are you going to decide to defend? You got about half a second. You do. About half a second to make that decision. You're not figuring, well, if I do this, then this. Yeah. If I do this, yep. All that's out. It is. It's that split second. It's one of those things when they give you the test and they say, tell me the first thing that comes to mind. That's the quickness of it. Okay? If the first thing that comes to your mind is you're going to run, don't try to second guess what you're thinking. If you're going to run, run. If you're going to fight, second guess yourself, because that's seconds that you don't have. So like she talked about for the defend part of it, okay? If you're going to defend, and we teach this, mainly for liability reasons. How to defend from someone with a gun. But just remember, if this is something that you decide to do, get as close to the door as you can, okay? Get in what they call the hard corner, okay? That one corner in the room where you can't see it from the outside. Get behind the door, okay? Get as close to the door as you can, so if you're gonna fight this bad guy that comes in with a gun, a knife, or whatever, you're close enough to him that you can grab and hold on to him and not let go. And once you grab a hold of him, you're in for the fight of your life. But if that's the decision you make, it and count. Okay? Like I said, the defend part of it is a mindset. Okay? How many of you guys think that you could do that? If somebody walked in here right now with a gun. Okay. So I'm going to tell you another story. Have any of y'all ever heard of Lieutenant Brian Murphy? He was a patrol lieutenant in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. One day he was on patrol. A call came in of an active attack at one of the temples in town. Lieutenant Murphy was the first one there. When he pulls up, there's kind of a long driveway that goes up to the temple. And in his mind, he's already working through his training. You know, what do I need to do? What do I see? So as he makes his way up, he sees two temple goers laying shot. In his head, he knows there's somebody with a gun. So he's thinking, I have my pistol and I have my rifle. He can't get to his rifle. Something messed up with the release on it. So when he went to release his rifle from the gun lock, it wouldn't come out. So instead of trying to get that out, Lieutenant pulls up, pulls his car sideways like he's been trained to do, gets out, starts running up to the victims and tries to help them. Well, while he's doing that, out of the corner of his eye, he catches bad guy running across the yard in front of the temple. Lieutenant Murphy gets up. He's probably 30, 40 yards from him. Yells, hey, stop. They exchange gunfire. Lieutenant Murphy misses. Bad guy hits him, strikes him in the chin. Rips through his larynx. Lieutenant Murphy dives behind his cop car. Loses sight of the guy. And if you read his story, he'll tell you that he gets on himself pretty hard for ever doing it. So he gets up, tries to find bad guy again. Well, it's too late. Bad guy's already behind him. Bad guy shooting him. And I think, let me see if I can find it. Lace, you remember how many times he was shot? Okay. So through all of this, Lieutenant Murphy was shot 15 times. Caught one in the chin, tore through his larynx, one to the back of the skull, took a bunch to his back, chest, legs, arms. The whole time this is going on, at one point he gets shot in the left thumb. So his thumb's gone. Loses his gun, and he's on his back, staring up at the bad guy that's fixing to kill him. And he's laying there and he tells himself, he gets that warm, fuzzy, cozy feeling. And his eyes start to close. Well, up there is from him. And this is what he said in his head as all this was going on. He said, I'm not going out in a parking lot. I'm not going out like this. I'm not going to let my wife down, let my daughter down, and I'm not letting my stepkids down. So through all of this, he still decided he was going to fight. But the bad guy never gave him the chance. Lieutenant Murphy's still alive today, but he can only talk with a whisper. The thing that saved him is he held on and crawled and crawled and crawled and tried to stay as far away from bad guys as he could until the guys he was working with showed up. They end up putting down bad guy. Lieutenant Murphy gets taken to the hospital and survives. The whole moral of that story is even though if one of these events happens, and something does happen, and let's say you get shot, you can't give up. Just because you're shot doesn't mean you're dead. You have to have the willpower to fight through it. If Lieutenant Murphy can do it after being shot 15 times, taking one to the back of the head, throat, pretty sure I can get in my mind that I can survive it. Like I said, in these events, you're not helpless, okay? You're only helpless if you let yourself be, okay? Doesn't matter if you're young, doesn't matter if you're old, doesn't matter if you're crippled, it doesn't matter to help in these events. Whether it be lock a door, decide to fight somebody off, okay? What you do matters in that moment. So like she talked about these attacks, they're over fairly quickly, okay? 55% of these attacks end before police ever arrive. So 55% of the time, these active attacker events are over and done with before the first cop car gets there. And that's in 3 minutes. It's pretty quick. In Mountain Home, 90 seconds. We may get lucky and it might still be going on, but even in 90 seconds, it's probably going to be over. Bad guy's going to go in, do what he needs to, either A, kill himself or run off, because he knows we're coming and he don't want to fight with us. Okay, so here's a little graph. So the attack begins, okay? Remember, like I said, 55% of the time, this is over before the cops ever get there, okay? 37% of the time, like I said, the attacker stops. Either kills himself or runs. 29% of the time in these events, the shooter commits suicide. The other 8%, they run off and they find them later. 18% of the time, the victim stops the attack. So 18% of the time, people have decided that they're going to defend against the attack. And they stop the attack before it gets any worse. Okay. 15% of the time when they decide to defend, they either subdue the bad guy, get him trapped somewhere. 3% of the time, somebody shoots him that's not a police officer. And 45% of them end after the police. So it's a pretty high percentage where you have to make those decisions what you're going to do before the cops ever get there. Okay? So once the cops get to alert, this is what the priority of work is for law enforcement when they arrive, okay? Our number one goal is to stop killing, okay? Once we've done that, we've taken out bad guy, that part's done, okay? The next step for us is we have to stop the dying. Every one of our officers has been through a Stop the Bleed class. No, we're not doctors and we're not paramedics, but we know just enough to get you to the hospital where you need to go, okay? And then once we've done that, we're going to try to get everybody out. Remember though, this isn't something that's going to happen super quick. This is hours upon hours upon hours of building. Because once we take care of the guy, we've got to make sure there's not another one. Okay? Because what they say is where there's one, there may be two. So that's what we train for. Statistically proven, there's only one attacker in these events. Very rarely do you see two. Columbine was one of them. It was one of the rare events where you had two shooters. But once all that's done and we get everybody out, you guys to where you need to go. So when the police do get there, okay, these are a couple things to remember, okay? Like she talked about, our stress response. Even though we train every year to do this and we stay at a high level of stress most days, they're probably going to come in and have you guys do stuff. Whether it be lay on your bellies or get on the wall. I mean, you're going to be nice about it. So just do what they ask, okay? Just do what they tell you to. If they tell you to put your hands up, put your hands up. If they tell you to get against the wall, get against the wall. If they tell you to crawl on the ground, if you can, crawl on the ground, okay? The medical side of it, like I said, everybody knows that around here, Baxter Regional, if there's a shooting at the church, they're not going to get anywhere close to it until everything's cleared, okay? That's where we encourage everybody to seek out training on your own, okay? There are training classes that you can take as civilians that will teach you how to do this, how to do what we do. It'll teach you how to control hemorrhaging. It'll teach you how to put on a tourniquet or pack a wound, okay? Seek that training. Officer Hollins, a Stop the Bleed instructor. If that's something you're interested in, that's something that we also offer, okay? So, like we talked about, the lockdown part of it, okay? Whose job is it to lock the door in the room? If you go in a room. Let's say a group of y'all go in a room. Whose job is it to lock the door? Okay? Could be the last one in, but it could be anybody in that room. That's the important part to think of. If you're going to lock down somewhere, somebody lock the door. It doesn't matter who. And don't just think somebody's going to do it. Okay? Oops, not too far. Okay, accountability and your standard response protocol, okay? Accountability. Who's holding you accountable if you do these drills? Like our teachers that do the drills, we hold them accountable. The district does, and the SROs do. It's our job to make sure that when they do these drills, they do them right, because at some point in time, they're going to need them, and we want to make sure they know how to do them, okay? So if you're going to do these drills and you're going to seek this training, you've got to have somebody to hold you accountable that you're doing it right and that you're going to keep in practice with it, so when something happens, you can remember it and you have that muscle memory, okay? So special issues. In an active shooter event, like I said, okay, law enforcement's not going to stop to help anybody that's shot or hurt until bad guys put down, okay? We as law enforcement can do that because that's how we're trained. But now medical staff, nurses, they can't abandon somebody that's hurt, or they could lose their license or their job, okay? The only way they can do that is if it's to save their self. A lot of people aren't able to avoid an attack. Think about a hospital. You got some people that may be in wheelchairs, they're laid up in bed, they can't avoid, they can't run away. So what's the next best thing? What do you need to do if you can't avoid an attack? Right. If you can't avoid an attack, get better at the other two, okay? Get ready to deny entry to wherever that is, or get ready to defend where you're at. Whichever one of these you can't do, get better at the other two, okay? The lockdown part of it. Can you lock down? Are you in a room that has locks, okay? Do the locks work? Like I said, who locks the door? It's everybody's responsibility to make sure that door's locked. Okay? Does it lock from the inside? Does it lock from the outside? Is it like our doors at school that require a key. Okay? Our doors at school are keyed on both sides. So you have to have a key to lock it and unlock it. Okay? Like it says, lockdown is not enough. Okay? You have to throw all three of those elements in to this when you lock down, okay? So you may lock a door, but don't just think a locked door is going to keep you safe, okay? Barricade that door with whatever you can find. Make it as dark as possible so nobody thinks you're in there, okay? What do you think, if something was to happen here, what do you think their best bet would be? Do they need to try to run back into the school and get into classrooms, or do they need to start running for exits? Exits, okay. Okay, and that may happen. Yep. So that's the thing is, whatever decision they make, they got to do it. Some may run to the classroom, some may run out of the building. Okay. Cafeterias are another tricky one. To get outside, I have 2 doors that go out that are in the cafeteria, plus the 2 in the kitchen. And me as the SRO there, if something was to happen in the cafeteria, my teachers know to take every kid in that cafeteria and shove them in the kitchen, because we can lock those kitchen doors and they have access to the outside where they can get across the road to the apartments or over to the athletic club. But that's something that I've talked about, okay? That's something that I thought of and came up with them. That's our plan if something happens while they're in the cafeteria. Think about this. Somebody brings a bomb, okay? Building's on fire now. Do you stay in lockdown? Okay. That just throws a whole nother loop in it. You know, everybody's scared of fire, nobody wants to get burned. But in the same breath, nobody wants to run out in the hallway and get shot. So it just kind of crams everything back together. Passing periods, I know at the junior high and the high school, passing periods are a real difficult time if something was to happen. Okay, it's another decision. Students try to get in the classrooms. How long do the teachers keep the doors open? Okay, how long do the teachers wait to see if kids are coming if something's happening? Okay, Sutherland Springs, Texas. Everybody remember that? Okay. Okay. November 5th, 2017. Okay. This was the deadliest shooting in Texas history and the 5th overall in the United States. It was the deadliest shooting in an American place of worship in history. What happened was, gunman decided to come to the church. He didn't have any reason to be there. He was just going, he knew there were people there and he was wanting to hurt somebody. One gunman, body armor, decides to go to the church, decides to shoot everybody inside. Okay. Gunman gets there, starts off inside, makes his way back out. Luckily for the survivors in Sutherland, neighbor across the road heard what was going on, went and got his gun, shoots bad guy. Bad guy drops his gun, jumps in his car, takes off, they chase him, and he ends up bleeding out from the gunshot wound before they ever got there. I think in total, 26 were killed and 20 more were wounded. I say 27 because I think one of them was an unborn baby, so I say 27 were killed, but they say 26, so it's just another thing. Think about it if you're driving around. How many of y'all carry when you're not here? If you're a concealed carry holder, like if you're out at Walmart or just driving down the road. So do I. I keep a gun with me all the time. That's me, I'm paranoid. Plus I have my wife and my daughter with me. So that's another thing to think of. Like she said, if you're gonna take action, take it. But make sure you can do it. Make sure you're able to make it work, okay? So our standard response protocol, this is what we teach everybody at school. This was made by the I Love You Guys Foundation, okay? It was developed by a guy named John Michael Keyes. His daughter was murdered in the Platte Canyon High School shooting in Colorado. And these next 4 are just a list of things that the students did in a combination of the incident, okay? So what we teach our kids and our teachers at school for our standard response protocol, and you guys can use this here, you can use it at home, you can use it wherever you're at, okay? The little exclamation point, whatever it is, okay? That's gonna be our symbol for a lockout. So if I'm at the school and I put out, what that means is there's something going on outside that I don't want to come in. We're gonna lock all of our exterior doors. Our kids and teachers are gonna still do business like normal, but nobody's gonna go out and nobody's gonna come in. So at the lower levels, we will walk our students through it as far as the lockout and the lockdown drills and show them what to do. And I think at the higher levels, they just kind of talk about it. They don't really show them everything. They just talk about it with them in case it is to happen. Onto that, the little red lock, that's going to be our lockdown. So that's when our teachers, like I said, they're going to shut their doors, make sure they're locked, throw that secondary lock, turn the lights off, and get all the kids away from the door. And what we tell is, if we ever go into a lockout or a lockdown, and they're locked in their rooms, they're not to come out unless me or one of the administrators let them out. All the SROs, if I can get them out of my pocket, nope. We all have keys to every door in every building in the district. The administrators have master keys for the building that they're in. The little green deal, like we teach them, is that's the symbol we use for that, and then shelter in place. So shelter in place might be used for an earthquake or like a chemical spill, or if you're over here at Nelson Wilkes, if something was to happen at Baxter Lab, we might go to a shelter in place until we figure out what is going on and if there's any chemicals outside. But if you guys want to know more about that, you can go to the iloveguys.org, and they have all that information on there, and it kind of just gives you a story about how they became founded and how all this came about. I know I talked fast, but I wanted to get out of here in 2 hours, so.
Okay, so what questions or clarifying points, concerns do you all have? So we kind of went through the psychology of things on the front half, okay, and understanding how we can better understand our body and its natural reaction to major stressors. And the second half, we talked about the options that you have as a private citizen should you find yourself involved in this. Now, some of these response protocols Officer Mays was talking about, yes, we utilize those in the schools, but those are just some examples of what you can bring into the congregation here at your church and implement them here. You can use every single one of those protocols here. They might just look a little bit different based off of the needs of this building and the congregation themselves, okay, yourself. So those are some types of tools that we can offer to you all, resources that we can offer to you guys to kind of better fit the safety of this building overall, to ensure that this building and your congregation is as safe as it possibly can be. So do you all have any questions about anything that we've talked about today? All right, we're going to do one exercise real fast, and then I promise we're going to let you guys go. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned several
Correct.
Is that kind of required reading for you guys? I mean, you got to study each one of those situations to see what went wrong, what went right.
We do try to clarify what kind of, just honestly what happened. We try to break down the situation as a whole to understand what folks are dealing with in these very different events. Like, none of them are cookie cutter. None of them really have the same background. All we can say is that there is a motivation for an avenged mindset as the background. Again, there's not a lot of cookie cutter pieces. That's kind of what makes this piece so critical to communities, is because I can't just give you guys a list of things that that you can check off and say, I'm not worried about going to Walmart today, or I'm not worried about going to Chili's or church. We just can't do that. So yeah, we are required to really study and analyze these types of events and try to gather that information to better make information available to the public. So there's, hundreds of events. That's why we have to make sure that we're correct in our numbers. We don't want to give you guys false information on that. But there are hundreds of events, and every one of them are unique to that particular area. Say that one more time. Yes, so I'm sure that you all kind of read about that. I think it was in yesterday's paper. So that was something that was handled within the school. There was no concern for safety at that moment. Our officer was involved in it, and then it ended up being, everything ended up being okay. So a lot of times there's an ability to make things more than what they are, and I can't really speak to that anymore. But everything is okay. Everything is as safe as can be at Pinkston Middle School. Yeah. So, anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What would you suggest that we put in these exit doors here if something was going on and we needed to protect ourselves from people that were outside?
Okay. So, what do we have in place here? Do we have anything particularly set in place that we don't know about? They're locked from the exterior?
Services start, the entrance doors are locked and there are people stationed at the door.
Perfect. Okay. And are those kind of your security details, or are those like some of your elders that you have here? It's security. Okay. And so each one of these, not only the interior doors, but the doors leading to the exteriors are as well? To go out, it's free. You can just free push the bar. That's very impressive that you guys have a plan of action as extensive as you do. We went and taught this to White River Baptist a couple months ago, and to hear kind of some of the different plans that some of those churches had available they were impressive. But I'll have to give it up to you guys. So far, you guys have the most advanced plan available that I've seen. You guys really kind of have things locked down. Honestly, that's an opinion of the church. You have to be careful with those things, because whenever you begin to put things and blockades available into those exterior doors, what can you have the potential to violate? Fire codes. So those are the very meticulous details you have to consider in that. But this takes a lot of time to sit down and prepare these types of things, but it sounds like you all are way ahead of the curve, and so if we can help with that, we would be happy to assist. But you do, that's something I would consider being cautious of, is things to barricade in front of those doors. Oftentimes, and statistics show, like Officer Mays talked about, you're pretty safe behind a locked door, because what do they want? What do bad guys know are coming? The police are coming. And here in Mountain Home, Arkansas, you got 90 seconds to get your job done. Okay, they got 90 seconds to 2 minutes to get their job done. I can promise that they are not going to waste time unless they have a very specific target in mind, and that's not considered an active mass attack. Okay, if they have a very specific target in mind, that's a homicide. Okay, that's homicide in progress. But statistically speaking, they're going for soft and available targets. Okay, so you are relatively safe behind locked doors. Okay. I would consider barricades more if, in fact, those were not locked on at least one side, okay? I know we think more is better, and that's kind of what that slide said. The more we have, the better we are, but So you have one at each door, is that correct? Each one of those 5 doors? Okay.
No, outside door.
Exterior doors. Okay. And then do you have any stationed right here, Tim? Okay. Okay. That's pretty impressive. Yes, sir.
So you had mentioned that you can't really identify, certain ethnic groups of people, males mostly, but, there are even females.
Yes.
But what about their method? Is the method the same, such as if you got a, structure like this and an auditorium like this, where are they going to probably sit? Where would we, what would they do if they come in? Is the method maybe similar?
Okay, so we're going to move into the scenario since you asked that. Do you have the clicker? Do you have the clicker? Okay, so he asked that question about what would this look like? Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a very real scenario that has happened right here in Mountain Home, Arkansas. And I want to, now that you know everything we talked about, I want you to use your critical thinking and I want you to paint this picture in your head with me and tell me how you think this should look, okay? Okay, so here's scenario 1. An unfamiliar man to your congregation walks into your church before Sunday worship begins. The man is armed with a Glock 22 pistol on his right side. So I carry a 23. So this is a pistol that's about 1 inch longer, okay? The man proceeds to browse through the breakfast area and shortly after arriving makes a plate and takes a seat by himself in a very high traffic area. Several church members grow concerned, and as a church leader, they begin to ask you what to do. How would you handle this? So where are my elders and my church leaders in here? I'm about to call you two out. So tell me, Mr. Cameron, what would you do thinking about this scenario? Okay, think about all the things that we talked about. The man has done nothing criminal at this point, okay? But again, this is private property. Okay, and dependent on your rules and what you require here, how would you see this situation being handled? You would approach him. Okay. Very, very kindly, is that what you said? Okay, very kindly. Okay. So how would you approach him? Tell me what you think, how you think that would look.
Hey, I'm Cameron. I'm one of the elders here. Glad you're here this morning. How can I help you?
Okay.
See what goes from there.
Would you ask about the pistol on his side?
Not immediately.
You don't think you would? Okay.
I don't think so. That may be what he's wanting. That may be the trigger.
Okay.
That clicks him off. Let that come a little later in the conversation, I think.
Okay. Okay.
Not too far down the road, though.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have anything different that they think would need to be done or considered?
Well, my opinion would be a little bit different.
Okay.
If somebody's carrying a gun or something like that, I may have to go up to them and say, put a little arm on so-and-so and go through that. But I'd say, why do you think you need that here?
Okay. Okay. So when you would walk up, Chief, how would that look for you? Because when this is all said and done, I'd tell you how this would look for me, okay? And it may look totally different than what you all think, but how do you think that would look for you? How would you approach that? Yeah.
Well, basically the same way he did it first, but that's the first thing I would ask him, what he needs that gun for, and that we need to talk about that in this atmosphere.
Okay. Okay.
Because mine would be a law enforcement stand.
It's hard to get away from that, huh?
Y'all are trained to be on top of things quick.
Yeah.
I want to answer quick.
I get that. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about how we would kind of approach this together. Yes, sir, back there.
There too, I mean, if you do have a security personnel, you want them involved in this at a distance, prepared to respond.
I was waiting for that to come up. Did everybody hear that? So that's what's so important about the plan that you all have in place right now is you have to think about those things in advance. Okay, so if Chief Mayfield was the one who was encouraged to be the elder to go and approach him in a non-law enforcement capacity, okay, even though that's hard for us, we don't switch that off very easy, okay? About the only time I do is in a bubble bath, and that happens like twice a year for me. I kind of shut down for like 30 minutes. So, yes, sir.
I've had to approach armed people in services, not this congregation, but a different one.
Okay.
And it was my job to do that. And so I was the bullet magnet.
Okay.
And so other people were watching if something happened. But when I would approach them, I'd say, sir, we have no problem you carrying a gun in here. please conceal it or take it back out to the car because we don't want to scare anybody.
Mhm.
And in most cases, in fact, all 3 cases that I had to do that, they all said, oh, no problem. So I either covered it up or they went back and one of them took it back out to the car.
Okay.
But that way they know right away that you don't have a problem with the situation. You're not ignoring the fact that they're open carrying.
Right.
But we have the right to ask them.
Absolutely you do.
Trespassing if they refuse to do it. They understand that you've seen that and you would rather them not do that.
Correct.
So you really haven't been too aggressive towards them or pushed them too far. And yet you can see how they're going to respond also to it, with the people who are watching the situation.
So I really like all of your answers on these. Say that one more time.
Did people keep watching? I was at.
Oh yes, always. And there's people you watch all the time, and like even the guy that was shot there, at White Settlement and everything, they were watching him like a hawk. He still killed 2 people. The deal is, you can never, no matter what you do, you can't solve all situations.
You can't solve them all.
And so the deal is that that's all you can do. But that way, you don't just go up and it's not just a brush off. Hey, it's like, you have a gun, appreciate it if you just conceal it because we don't have a problem with that. And they understand. And then in a couple of them, I said, and if you do have to pull it, we'd appreciate you're sure of your target. And they kind of laugh about it. You kind of break the tension of the whole situation.
So I really like every piece that everybody has talked about so far. And I'll say that we gave this scenario the last time that we talked to a group of churches, and we got a lot of different and varied answers to this. So this is how I would approach this, okay? Take the law enforcement out of things, but if I was a member of your congregation and I was a part of, let's say, the security side of things, okay? So here's the details that we know about this. So the man is armed with a Glock 22 on his right side. I'm a lefty, okay? He makes a plate and he sits down. I'm going to approach this person pretty quickly, especially if other people are starting to grow concerned that they see a weapon and an unfamiliar face. What side do you think I would probably want to sit on? The side he's got a weapon on, right? Because what if something goes south? Where am I at? I'm right on top of that, okay? So that's something to consider, okay? But I would approach it in a kind and friendly manner too, because again, the man's done nothing illegal, okay? May have violated some church policy about, hey, we can't bring a firearm in here, okay, unless it's approved. But if someone walks in off the street, they may not know that, okay? So there's really no need to escalate things. But you can speak kindly to that person. But I'm probably going to sit about as close as I possibly can to that person on their right-hand side, okay? And then approach things based off of the church's policy and protocol, because it's acceptable to have that in a congregation this big, okay? I would probably ask, hey, again, I need you to conceal your weapon, or listen, we've got a security team here. We've got plenty of guns on campus because this is considered a campus. Plenty of guns on campus. We appreciate that you're here, but we're probably going to ask you politely to take that out to the car, depending on whatever it is, whatever your rules and regulations are, okay? Before I would have ever approached that person, though, I'm definitely getting some other people on my side, especially somebody with a gun and who knows how to use it. Okay, now they may be at a safe distance, maybe just a few feet away, and that person doesn't even know that they're around, okay? But what are we doing? We're closing the gap in on the availability of what? Targets, okay? Again, nobody's done anything criminal, but it's just something to think about. So these are the kind of scenarios that my church leaders here, I really want you guys to consider whenever you talk about security in the future, okay? So again, we're here at church, so just think about these types of scenarios and pre-plan and pre-script these types of scenarios so that you know exactly how you can handle them, okay?
You do see more people carrying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You out shopping. It used to, years ago, you'd never see that. But it's not unusual now anywhere you go to see somebody carrying.
It is not unusual. It's not unusual. Yes. So this happened at a local church a couple years ago, and the response to it was not very good. Okay, so police were called, and we had some accusatory things going on, and this person was there in church to get some help, okay, and hadn't done anything wrong, just happened to have a sidearm on, and it made people really upset, but the unfortunate part behind that is they did not know how to respond to that because there was no pre-planning, okay? So that's what I'm going to keep going back to and encouraging you guys to do, is continue to practice in your head, because whenever you can get your brain right, everything else is going to fall into place, okay?
I doubt very many people in the overall in the church understand that it's not illegal for him to carry on.
Correct. Yeah.
Nowadays.
Correct.
Maybe this time next year, the Attorney General may have a different opinion of it. But
We might have a different opinion. Yeah, I don't know. And you know what? Arkansas is one of the more kind of liberal states whenever it comes to gun laws. We're pretty easy around Arkansas, guys. It's not hard to have and carry a weapon. Like, as long as you're felony free, you can pretty much have a gun, okay? So, you know, those are the times that we're turning towards. These things are happening more and more often. So again, not to make anybody scared or paranoid, just to create a heightened sense of awareness, and especially here at church, because you should be able to come in here and feel safe, okay? And you guys are doing a bang-up job making sure that that happens. So congratulations on that. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And as these types of events happen, we're going to see it more and more often. Okay, now are those people pretty proficient? I would like to think so. I certainly wouldn't want a bullet magnet sitting on my hip if I wasn't absolutely proficient in my weapon, because if someone walks in this room right now with intentions of killing everybody in this room, who do you think they're going to go after first? The person with the exposed weapon, okay? I can tell you that if places were reversed for me, that's exactly what I would do, okay? So if you're not proficient in that, again, we have the right to defend ourselves, but do we necessarily have the ability to? So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I appreciate and thank each and every one of you for being here tonight, and those of you who are live streamed. I appreciate it. Any questions that we can answer, I'll be hanging around for just a little bit. Otherwise, I can leave my email and phone number with Cameron or the chief. And please email me or call me or Officer Mays, and we'll be happy to answer any questions for you, okay? Did I have one more right here? Yes, sir.
I just had a concern. We've talked a lot about securing the building, lockdowns and everything inside the building.
Yes.
I feel that it's kind of vulnerable outside, because we have two buildings.
Okay.
And there's foot traffic between the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
At certain times, each time. And I think it'd be very vulnerable for something to happen outside.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if we need some kind of security issues beyond the inside of the building outside.
Do you know if you have any protocols for the exterior of your building? I hate to keep putting you on the spot, I know. Okay. Okay. So so let me ask this: whenever the congregation leaves this building, does everybody go over to? Is it a different worship hall or like what's the other building? Oh, okay, okay. So you have the potential for some heavy foot traffic. Do you ever put security on the exterior when that happens? Not typically.
Vacation Bible school.
You do? Okay, okay. So that may be something that you all consider in your talks, you know, if you guys have regular security talks, thinking about, hey, how can we, you know, maybe button up some concerns for the exterior of the building, because you all are kicking butt here inside, okay? You guys are doing great.
His concern, he's around the building, we've had, you probably well know, we've had stabbings and everything else at that pavilion.
Yes, you have.
With the woodlot in the village in the woods there, and it's always, you find a lot of stuff around the building. People have left things, you know, camping out nearby.
And this is you know, in this part of town, there's some socioeconomic struggles. You've got some apartment buildings that are not but just 2-3 blocks down the road that operate off of a lower rent. So you're going to get those socioeconomic problems, and those bring in a lot of transients. Those bring in a lot of people that have the potential to be downtrodden. Okay, we do have a homeless population. We are trying to combat that problem the best we can and provide resources, but we do have, just like everywhere, after COVID happened, there was a boom in the homeless population. So Mountain Home is not unfamiliar to that. And where do they gravitate to? You know, some of the poorer parts of town, which is not very, we don't have a lot of that, but we do have some of the more lower waged areas of Mountain Home. That's not too far off from here, okay? So just something to think about, you know, just something to maybe consider in your conversations from here on out. But that's a great question. That was a great question. Anything else?
We have a lot of cut throughs here also. People cut through from one
Do they?
side to the back, so that causes the problem too.
Okay. Okay.
During the vacation, Bible school, we're concerned about people driving through the parking lot while we have kids coming across there. But Sunday mornings, we have people moving across there. Wednesday evenings, we have people moving across there. So we have a lot of egress and ingress back and forth. Between the two, we really don't have anybody out there watching that.
Okay. Yeah, I would just consider adding that to, you know, to any type of security agenda that you have, and consider, you know, working that out to the best of your ability. And sometimes those are easy fixes, and other times you kind of have to research maybe how other congregations, other churches that are built similar to yours are operating in those capacities. For you all, you are dead center of town. I mean, the smack dab middle of town, okay? And you do have a lot of traffic from two very heavily populated roads. Not only do you have US Highway 62 and the biggest intersection, you're sitting in between both of those, but you have College Street too, which is a cut through for 201 and the back side of town. Okay, so you got a lot of traffic around here, okay? Something to consider. All right, folks. Well, go home and get some rest, eat some supper. Thank you for being here tonight, and we'll be in the back if you all need anything for just a few more minutes. Thank you very much.